All right, so welcome everybody. So this is our weekly edition here of our weekly Zoom call. Yeah, it's great to see everybody that's been watching the last couple recordings or sorry, the last couple meetings that we've had, live and recorded. Yeah, a lot of you seem to be getting some good feedback. I'm getting a lot of good feedback from these videos from the content that's coming out. So I just want to touch on a little bit of housekeeping before we get started today. I'm going to be having a State of the Union address on the state of chiropractic in British Columbia as it currently stands. We have lost a lot of rights as chiropractors. As practicing chiropractors, we aren't allowed to talk about a lot of things that we help people with chiropractic. Any of you chiropractic advocates out there who enjoy the benefits that chiropractic gives you, beyond just the aches and pains relief, the enhanced mood, the baby that's no longer colicky, the better ease that you had in your pregnancy because of chiropractic care, the ease of labor, all that stuff, having healthy children, because they have a better functioning nerve system, better functioning immune system, all these things. So these are all rights that we have, but we're losing our right to be able to choose what kind of chiropractor that we want to go see. They want to try to put us in this box that unfortunately I don't fit in. And I am kind of sick of not having my voice heard anymore. And there's a lot of us chiropractors out there and practice members or clients, whatever, that are sick and tired of their voices not being heard either. So if you want to join this movement, it's going to be we're really hoping to make some really good positive change in the province of British Columbia. Currently, British Columbia is kind of leading the way for chiropractic within Canada. So we really have a really big opportunity here to lead in a positive direction rather than really backtrack to the progress that chiropractic has made and holistic healthcare has made over the last several decades. So let's have our voices heard. So next Wednesday, I'm going to announce the time in the next newsletter. So if you're not already on our newsletter, make sure you sign up for that. I'm going to try to have a link to that too, but if not, just send me an email. It's on my website, sparklinglife.ca. I'll have those links at the end of this video as well, and possibly here too, depending. Now let's talk about how to move like a 20-year-old. So there's a couple of key principles here that I want to talk about. So first of all, first and foremost, if you want to move like a 20-year-old, the most obvious, and I think sometimes people don't, they're looking for the easy answer sometimes or whatever, but the most obvious is get out there and move. If you want to start moving better again, get out there and start doing more activity again. If you've been sedentary for the last while and you're feeling like, oh, geez, I've kind of become a bit of a couch potato, or I'm at my desk way too much in front of the computer and getting sore neck, shoulders, back, all these things are starting to happen. I'm starting to feel old and crippled and whatever. Get out and move is, probably the first and most obvious thing to do, because movement will keep the joints limber and moving. Rather, think of an old screw or something like that. If you've got an old screw and a nut that's tied together, and you have it in water, and let's say it's not the stainless steel variety. So if you don't move it regularly, it'll rust up, right? Similarly, in our bodies, if you don't move your joints regularly, they start to seize up, and that can happen just naturally over time. The joint can seize up in a relatively well aligned position, and that can turn into things like arthritis, osteoarthritis, and there's things like rheumatoid arthritis that can happen with aging as well, or doesn't have to be aging, but that's where the joint is actually starting to being eaten up by more of autoimmune type condition, where the body is kind of attacking the joints. Versus osteoarthritis is where you start to have the cartilage between, or the hyaline cartilage and the joint tissue starts to wear down, and then eventually there's no more joint space, and these start to get they start to build up extra bone growth to protect that joint from getting hurt. And that's where you get those big bony knuckles, things like that, oftentimes from osteoarthritis. But anyway, keeping the joint limber and moving is one of the best ways to prevent that. There's other factors, of course, that play in. One of them being what I deal with as a chiropractor. If there's a joint that's stuck out of position and not moving properly, that can turn in again to that arthritis type condition over time if that joint doesn't get back to moving. But if it's stuck out of position and locked up, a lot of times unless you're given the proper ideal conditions to really, give your body the space to really open up and correct that itself, which it does have the capability of doing. And that's something that I'm starting to work with more and more, is starting to teach people how, and this is why in the last couple of Zoom calls, I've talked about the coaching work and the wellness retreats. Wellness retreat is something I'm working on putting together, which is, I just kind of hosted one unofficially with just a one-on-one client, kind of a family friend that came and joined me for a week in my house. And we did like an intense wellness retreat. We adjusted regularly to make sure that the nerve system was clear. But then on top of that, we were, getting out in nature. And that's my next step for moving like a 20-year-old, is get out in nature, and not just out in nature, but really connect to nature. And I mean, by way of, when you get out there, take off your shoes and socks and get out there barefoot, touch the ground, and try to stay off concrete, things that are man-made, because those don't transmit natural energy as well as nature in its pure form. So you can get out in the dirt, in the lawn, and wherever that's you can just go walk barefoot. There's been a lot of research in what we call grounding or earthing or things like that. You can look up, if you just look it up, there's companies that create things like grounding mats. And I think I talked about this in the last one. It also works for stress release. But grounding is really, really good for aches and pains a lot of times, for arthritis. They found that 20 minutes a day of grounding can, in a pilot study that they did looking at earthing and grounding, they found that 20 minutes a day had drastically reduced the arthritis pain in arthritic, in patients with arthritic joints, better than most of the medications they were testing against. So they found that, that is something that's free. First of all, you go out there and ground, in the winter, it's a little harder. And that's where they have these companies that do grounding mats. If you go into my stress video that we did last week, I go into that a little bit more, how that works. I'm not going to cover that again this week, but getting out and grounding, the way it works and how it helps with inflammation in the body, which is what arthritis is ultimately. It's areas of the body that are inflamed. And that's part of the healing response. But if it's stuck in the inflammation mode, then that can deteriorate the joints, right? That's what arthritis is. The way grounding works is, well, first of all, you have to understand that inflammation, how it is developed in the first place. So if you've got joints that have inflammation, so extra fluid in that area, there's a lot of free radicals in there that cause the inflammation in the first place. On short term, that's very important for the healing process. Inflammation is crucial for a joint to properly heal. But again, if it's in chronic inflammation mode, it starts to deteriorate the joint, and it can start to cause arthritis and pain associated with that. So if we can find a way to to reduce free radicals, or basically an imbalance of positive negative charge in the body, what happens is that creates free radicals, which then create inflammation in the body, which then can result in pain. So what grounding has the effect of doing, when we put our feet on the earth without having any rubber or anything that is a conducted, or what is it? What do they call that? If it stops conduction of electricity. Anyway, rubber is a very good one of those. So if you're wearing soles, on your feet, shoes, you're preventing your body from being able to ground, to connect our electrical field with the earth. So when we connect with the earth, what happens is, as we know with magnets, when there's a positive and negative force, they get attracted to each other. And if there's two forces that are the same, they repel each other. So if you've got an excess of, and I can't remember, I've got to look into the science. Is it an excess of electrons in the body, or is it a excess of positive? I believe it's extra positive charges. And what we do is we intake electrons, the negative charges, from the earth, and they get basically sucked up through the electrical field, because it's a negative charge, a positive charge attracting negative charges. And then once it's balanced, then you're balanced. So as little as 20 minutes a day, they found, can drastically reduce arthritic pain. So again, it's a free thing. The pharmaceutical industries aren't going to tell you about this, because they want to sell you drugs. They're about profit making and things like that. That's just the system they're in. Love it or not, whatever, it is what it is, right? But that's their motives, right? They are there to make more profits. So they want to sell more products to get more profits naturally. So they're not going to tell you about these things. You're not going to hear this from mainstream. You're going to hear this from people like me, from people who have done their own research, from people like clients who tell me these things, and I start to research them and find out, hey, there's something to this, So a lot of the stuff that I've learned over the years has not been from my professional education. In fact, a lot of my professional education I've had to forget in order to relearn the real truths about the way the universe works and nature, and being that we're all connected to that. We're not separate from nature, and that's one of the big things, right? I want to give you a couple practical movements, just to move better. That can help. So it's something I like to do in my routine. There's one movement in particular that a lot of people in Western culture have completely lost the ability to do, including myself. I am just retraining myself over the last 6 months to be able to do this very natural position called a squat. I had a lot of issues in my joints because of lack of stretching properly, not really taking care of my body as well as I could have. We all have, the ability to improve our health in different ways, right? For me, I wasn't moving my body in stretches enough. I was very active in getting out and, being out there and using my muscles and building strength, but not very well at the stretching. And, you need to have a balance of the two, right? To have a properly functional and healthy body. So the squat, I'm going to just quickly demonstrate form here. So I'm just going to move my microphone a little bit here, just so it's out of the way and you can see, and hopefully you'll be able to hear me just fine, but I'm going to move the screen down a bit too so you can see me while I do the movements. So the first one being the squat, I'll show you first of all in just from the sideways form here. The idea here is you want to keep everything, your ears over your shoulders. You want to keep everything kind of level in this position. So, just standing up, upright position, just nice and neutral. If you have a forward head tilt, or if you're, curved, don't worry, just get in as close to neutral for yourself. But ideally, you want to get in a neutral position, and simply you're going to bend with the knees and the hips evenly, and you're just going to get straight down. So you want to keep your back straight here the whole time here if you can, okay? So we're going to just go down and just squat all the way and try to keep that back straight as best you can, and then just come straight back up. Okay, so I'll show you from the front this time. So just coming straight down into the squat like this. You want to keep both knees bending evenly. You want them evenly out. You don't want one out more than the other. See, for me, I used to squat like this because this knee was giving me issues. By working with this squat and being able to kind of just hang out here for, minutes at a time, I've kind of trained myself to get in this squat position and be able to just hang out here for really, I can be here for a good 5-10 minutes and be fine. Whereas before I started training myself with the squat, what was happening was I would be in excruciating pain as soon as I get in that position. My joints would be locking and clicking and because the joints hadn't moved like that in a long time. But that is a very natural position. You look at people who still live very in tune with their with our basically biological making. So people that live still in what we call primitive tribal villages and things like that do very natural movements still, and biomechanically are way better off for it. I was fortunate enough to go do a trip of service through chiropractic service in Ghana in 2012. We spent what was it, just over 2 weeks. It was about 17 days, I think we were out there. We were adjusting for 2 weeks of those. There's 4 of us chiropractors. Over those 2 weeks, we adjusted over 10,000 people. There was 4 of us chiropractors. So do the math. That was a lot. That was my busiest 2 weeks in practice by far. But people were lining up for care, so we didn't have time for chit chat. We didn't have time for whatever. We did a short little 5-minute lecture about this is what chiropractic is, this is what we do. Before we would start adjusting people, they would have a translator that would translate for us, or if they spoke English or French, we were able to speak for them, or speak to them directly. And once they understood, to them it just made intuitive sense. Yes, keep the joints moving in the spine. It's important. That's so important in our culture to be moving and because they're very physical in their work. And you would think so. Going in there as a Western educated chiropractor, I had the mentality thinking, okay, they're going to have some messed up spines because, they're working with labor. They're putting stuff on their, balancing heavy things on their heads, constantly. And, they're going to have some messed up spines. They were, they definitely were subluxated. They definitely needed adjustments, but a lot of them were some of the easiest adjustments I've done. They moved like butter. Like the joints just moved so smoothly. They were locked out of place, but as soon as you put a little impulse in the right direction, it was just like, just slid back into place. And then right away they'd get up off the table and be like, oh, there's life flowing through my body. And they were moving easier, and, and just so grateful for the, in their case was only maybe 1 or 2 adjustments that a lot of them will probably ever receive in their lives. But because they have a very different culture and move easier, I actually found that biomechanically, they were in better shape than most Canadians and Americans. Okay. And that to me is pretty sad, because we have, the most advanced healthcare in the world. We have some of the most advanced technology for healthcare, but when you look at our healthcare system, it's not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system. So being a sick care system, it does not promote health. It's great with managing sickness and disease in some cases, and in a lot of cases, but it's not, health does not come from a bottle of pills, from cutting out organs, or from, radiation or chemotherapy. That's the main tools of medicine. And, medicine, in that respect does not create better health. It can remove blockages that are, cancers and tumors and, blocked arteries and, you name it. They're really good at that for the crisis care, right? But when it comes to health promotion, that comes from only one place, and that's from within. Okay. So healing comes from within. That's something that we've really lost, I think, as a concept, as a culture. And that's why with this whole coronavirus, this whole fear and this whole lockdown, and the way that policymakers are handling this it's such a fear-based place. When when you stop and think about it, we have co-evolved with viruses. And as humanity, I mean, if we couldn't adapt and survive viruses, we wouldn't be here today. The proof, the fact that we're here overpopulating, in some people's eyes, overpopulating the planet, is proof that we can co-evolve with viruses, and we have for millions of years, right? Life on this planet has co-evolved, but in the last few hundred years, or since Western culture, really, there's been a disconnect. The way that we viewed nature, viewed the way that, viewed ourselves in comparison to the natural world, we viewed ourselves as different. So when it comes to the human body, and when we want to feel better and stuff, we tend to look at the, what can I do to, kind of build my body in an artificial way, rather than work with the natural world to build it back up. So getting back to, primal movements, to, primal eating, to, different things, living, more like living, when it comes to eating real foods versus processed foods. We are biologically evolved to eat natural foods. We're not biologically programmed to eat all these other foods. We've learned to adapt to it, but it's not it's not what we thrive on. That's for sure. So those are a couple, that's one of the movements. Couple other simple ones I'm just going to show you here, and then I'm going to wrap up and open it up for questions. Just show you this one here again. So there's a very simple, I call it kind of your sun salutation yoga routine that I was taught at a retreat once, which I really like. I'll give credit to Dr. Tom Preston for this one. He had taught me at his retreat. A couple simple moves that I like to do in the morning that kind of gets my body moving, get the joints kind of moving. So the first one I like to do is kind of a sun salutation. And if I got the words wrong, any of you yogis out there, please correct me, and I can correct those in the, in an update or something. But anyway, so the first one is kind of like the sun salutation, where you stretch up, take a big breath, and then let it out. And then we'll kind of stretch down to the ground. And then with the breath in, we'll do a half, big breath in, kind of come halfway up, and then drop down again with the out breath. And then what we'll do from that position, we'll get into our cobra. So we'll go down, into the cobra position. And then from there into the downward dog. Hold that for a breath. And then back into the forward bend. And then we'll just slowly come back up. And, and then we get back into the, I don't know if that's the prayer position or salutation again. But that's just a very simple routine. I like to do it, in my, in First Nations culture that I've been really resonating with and studying lately. there's a lot to do with the 4 directions. So I like to do 2 of those sequences in each of the 4 directions. So I'll start in the east and work my way all the way to the north. And it's just something that I like to do. It's a bit of a spiritual practice that I like to do as part of my movement routine in the morning. So those are, a couple simple routines that you can start with. And, like anything, it's all about baby steps, right? Um, rather than trying to, make a drastic change and holding that, and making that a big life change, taking it in little steps is a lot easier, right? So you can, and then you're setting yourself up for success. You kind of build on the wins. So if you just add one little movement a day, do that for 30 days, and then you can add another one. And if you feel bold and you think you can do it, you can add 2 the next time, and just kind of build on it, right? So yeah, that's a couple tips on how to start moving better, easier, start moving like a 20-year-old again. It's something I've found helpful as I'm, getting into my 40s. I definitely notice that if I don't do the self-care as regularly, I do feel it. I feel a difference. Thankfully, I have taken pretty good care of my body along the way, and I don't deal with chronic aches or pains. I feel really good most of the time, but I do feel it if I don't keep up with my care more. So, for those of you who are maybe a little further in age and feel it every day and are in chronic pain, don't be discouraged. Start with a little step. And if you start noticing an improvement, build on that, right? So, and again, for those of you that are interested, if you do want to coach with me one-on-one or want to find out more about wellness retreats that I'm putting together, if you want to get on contact list for that, let me know, and I will add you on there. I'll put the links to how to contact me, how to get in touch, and we can set up a free consultation if that's something you want to talk about. Otherwise, hopefully we'll be seeing you in the office next week for regular wellness care. And if not, hopefully as soon as possible. But yeah, have a great long weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.